Hello and welcome to the Martial Arts Teaching Tactics Podcast. I'm Chris Kent, and I'm joining Chris Bean. Mr. Bean?
Hello, sir.
Today we're going to be discussing and talking about grading our students. The idea behind grading our students is that we want to have a scale or a benchmark or several different points that we can refer to when we are trying and helping our students to improve. And so rather than just having the idea of wanting our students to be good enough or wanting our students to be better or wanting our students to reach that next level, quote unquote, we want to actually have a way of quantifying and actually have a way of determining what that might look like so that we are able to help them reach that next level or make improvements rather than just a general specific idea of doing better or getting better. So we're going to discuss the different ways that we can quantify that and identify that in each student specifically, because it's important to understand that not all of our students are created equal. So everyone has to start somewhere, and when a new student is beginning their training, they may already be able to pick up new skills quickly, meaning they can perform them at an average level already from the start. So we don't want to compare them or grade them the same way as we would someone who has a little more difficulty working on those moves. So setting that grading system for our students is a great way to have a standard to hold each and every person to. And today we're going to be looking at a system for that, and we're going to look at what we use as a 10-point grading system. So, Mr. Bean, could you break down a little bit of our 10-point or 10-level grading system?
Yeah, the breakdown would go something like this. A level 1 needs a lot of attention, performs their moves poorly, lacks focus or control. A level 5, the midway point, can perform their moves at average level. They can pick up moves pretty well, and they have a fair level of focus and control. A level 10, the top of the number here, the number scale, is they excel. They are easily capable to perform their moves. They learn quickly, and they don't really need any extra attention. Okay, and you may choose to grade your students on a per belt level, or you may look at them as a overall and see how they change from white belt on their journey to black belt. The goal, of course, is to get your students to improve over time. So whether you're looking at them on a per belt level or as a total number system, that is not really relevant. The key to this is making sure that they are improving and progressing over the time they're training with you. For us, we tend to give our students a loose score that changes as they stay with us. So we have this person is a level 1 at white belt, and then as they progress through, we want to look at that level 1 and see that level 1 turn to a level 2 and 3 and so on by the time they get to their black belt. Okay, our goal really is to try to raise whatever level they start at. We want to raise that level by 3 points by the time they test for their black belt. And the reason behind this grading system, or to have this idea, is so that you can know how much you can push your student and how much time you need to spend with them before they are overloaded, before you're giving them too much, whether that's too much feedback, too much correction, to whatever it is. But you want to have an idea of where that student stands so that you're not giving them too much. You also want to make sure that you are there with them for enough time that they are able to understand and grasp the concepts that you're talking about as well.
As I mentioned at the beginning, this is different for every person. So you're talking about someone starting at a level 1, and then hopefully by the time they make it to our black belt, they've improved at least 3 points to put them at a 4. Well, not everyone's going to start at that level 1. I might have someone that starts at a level 4, and then them improving by 3 points would put them at a level 7. Or, a level 5 begins, and by the time they make it to black belt, they only improve 2 points, but they're also at that level 7. So again, having this broad idea of what this looks like, and then determining for each person where they start at, and helping them raise those levels up is important. That we're not pushing someone who begins at a level 1, pushing them as if they were a level 5 and expecting level 5 performance from them because they're not at that level yet. So we're not saying that everyone is a level 1 when they start. We're saying that there are different levels to it. We need to find out where you are when you start, and then from that point, we want to try to raise you up to a higher level over time as you're with us. And as you said, we do it from the beginning of their training until that, they get to black belt or when they stop training with us. So it's not like each belt level we're starting you over. So you get to the second belt level. Well, you were a level 7 when you tested for your new belt, but now that you have your new belt, you're back to 1. So you got to get back up to 7 again. It's a long-term grading scale.
Yeah, and if you do choose to do it by belt level, I would say with that mindset or with that idea, you would want to say, okay, anybody that's this green belt level, you want to have a level 5 by the time they move to the next belt color, right? And so you want to make sure that everybody that's that belt color, maybe they started at level 4, or they started at level 3, okay, so they have a little bit of work to do before they get to that level 5 that you really want them to be at before they move to the next level. And so the mindset for that is you're looking at the growth inside of that belt color, inside of that quarter, inside of that section of time that they're that belt level, and how much they can progress and move to the next level. And if that's the standard you want to hold, that's great. Just understand that that's the standard. So that means that everybody that is a green belt, by the time they progress to the next level, they are a level 5. Whatever that number 5 looks like to you, everybody that moves is a level 5. And that means if they're not a level 5, then that, they potentially are held back, and they need to redo that information until that time that they are that level 5 that you need them to be at before they move to the next section of their training. And so really you're doing the same, we're using the same kind of ideas, the same mindset. For us specifically, we are looking at it as a total, where that student starts at from white belt and then where they end at black belt. If you did it per belt level, that's a great way to do it, maybe even more efficient, and it'll be a more standardized process if you did it per belt level, because that means that everybody is this purple belt is this level, everybody that's a brown belt is this level, and so on. It's just two sides to the same coin.
Yeah, and maybe before we continue even farther, could we reiterate why it's important to have this scale, why this grading system is important, not only for new people coming in, but what are the pitfalls and downfalls if we don't have an idea of these kind of levels and grades and we start treating everyone the same? Because I think there's, on both sides, there can be negatives, whether it be you are someone who performs at a lower level, or if you're someone that performs at a higher level. So again, if we can reiterate why it's important to have this grading scale, why it's important to grade our students this way.
Yeah, so my mindset behind that is, if we have a class of 20 white belts, and I want everybody to be at, let's see how that's a good question. If we have those 20 white belts, and some of them are going to be at the upper end of this level, they can perform the moves adequately, they learn quickly, they're ready to move on to the next material, the next belt level. And then you have some people that are at the lower end of that are not quite up to par. They have troubles figuring out the moves, and maybe that's a learning style that we need to traverse and learn as we're teaching them. And of course, you have the people that are in the middle of the spectrum. And so the tough part is, if we don't have a system like this in place, then we are treating everybody the same. It doesn't matter if they have troubles learning this. It doesn't matter if it comes super easy to them or if they're somewhere in the middle. If I don't have this kind of per student grading system, then it's very difficult for me to track their progress over the time. It's also very difficult to motivate the student, because otherwise, if I look at them as a total, I'm motivating white belts and not the individual people that are white belts. And so that's why I personally think this is an important process to go through, or at least have an idea of what this looks like as far as your students go and how that relates to their training with you. And would you have anything else to add to that, sir?
I would agree with all that. And then, just keeping in mind that some students at a lower level might not at the time or even ever be able to perform or meet the same level as some of the other students. So if I'm grading and basing the lower level students off of the performance of the higher level students, I am doing that lower level student a disservice. And it's not fair to them for them to be trying as hard as they possibly can and doing, the best work that they can possibly do, to say, oh, that wasn't good enough because you weren't at the level of the highest end of the class. So I think it's important that we keep that in mind, knowing what level they are at and treating them appropriately according to their effort and the way that they are personally capable of doing things, rather than comparing them to the high end of the class. It's that idea that we're only as good as our lowest common denominator. So our class is only going to be as good as that lowest level. And not that I need to treat the whole class according to that lowest level, but I'm not going to make that lower level perform to the same as a higher level. And I just keep saying lower and higher levels, but hopefully my idea is getting across. I don't want to treat someone who is doing their best poorly because their best isn't as good as someone else's worst. So just in the way that we interact with them and the way that we grade them individually, it's important to know where they're at, and vice versa. If I know someone on the high end or high level in that class, I'm not going to allow them to do a lower level technique because I know that they can do a better technique, and I'm going to grade them according to that. So yes, everything that you said and more. I think we don't want to do a disservice to our students and treat them unfairly. Although it may seem like we're treating everyone not the same, because we are. We're not treating everyone the same based on their...
Because everybody's different. Everybody has different levels of learning. Everybody has different levels of understanding how their body moves. And like you said, if you try to hold those students that are at the lower end of the spectrum to the standard of the higher level, you're setting them up for failure. That's something they're not capable of doing.
Right, yeah. And don't get us wrong. We're not saying that you should let people slide by. I'm not saying that, hey, this low level person can't do that move. You need to, as we've already discussed, have your curriculum, have your testing parameters, and have things that they need to be able to do. What I'm saying is their technique might not look as good or be as good or be as fluid as the high level of the class. But if they can still do that technique to the best of their ability, then I can move forward with that. But I'm not saying let them, slide past or get around something they shouldn't do. If you have those clear-cut testing guidelines and they can't do those specific things, they can't do those specific things. They need to be able to do it to the best of their ability. I'm just saying that their best may not look good. I'm just saying that their best might not look as good as someone else's worst, or they're not all comparable because everyone is different. So we need to keep that in mind. That way we're not, as I said, doing a disservice to either side, the lower level or the higher level of that spectrum.
Yes, sir. And, as we're in those classes, it's very easy to spend time with the students at the upper end of the scale. They're easy to teach. They pick up new information quickly, which means you can push them always to do more. However, you should be spending your time with the students at the lower end of the scale. Okay, they need your time. Yes, it'll be harder work, but it will be more rewarding when you see those students perform well in the end. To see that student that starts as a level 2, and by the time they move up to black belt, they're a level 6, is so much more rewarding than seeing somebody start at level 5 and then still only make it to up to a level 7 by the time they get black belt. They're nearly close or identical by the time they get black belt, but seeing that person that starts at a level 2 traverse and make it all the way to 6, as opposed to someone that only moves 2 points on the scale, is it's just a completely different way of looking at it, right? It's so much more rewarding seeing that person move all the way up to the upper end. That means they really had to put the time in, they put the work in, they put the practice in to move and grow and improve over that time.
And that doesn't diminish from the other person's effort as well. Whether you moved 5 levels or you moved 2 levels, you still made an improvement, and it's still worthy of being praised and worthy of being noticed. And as we're talking about this stuff already, there's so many caveats, and I'm thinking back to our interview with Professor Brummett. If you listen to the episode or think back to that episode when he talked about the sister and brother students, one of them, the brother was on the lower end, and so Mr. Brummett felt he needed to spend more time with that student and helping them, correcting them, and giving them guidance, and then teaching them the moves, while the sister was on the higher end, and she was one of those students that picked things up very quickly and didn't need a whole lot of attention when she was doing class. And at the end of the day, the sister quit because she wasn't getting the attention. So when we say, don't spend as much time with the higher end, spend more time with the lower end, there is a very fine line in the fact that you can't ignore the higher end. You still need to spend time with them, but your attention might be more valuable or more useful on that lower end. But we're not saying, hey, put the high level students in the corner and have them practice their moves over and over and over again, because that's just alienating them and making them feel less than. Even if they don't need the extra attention, you still need to give them attention and treat them as valuable. Again, there's so many caveats that they're not all on the same level. Everyone's not the same, but we need to make sure that we are treating everyone appropriately. It's a difficult thing to traverse, difficult thing to navigate, because you have to be able to know where everyone's at and then be able to know how to deal with those situations and not neglect somebody, but also give the people that need more attention the attention they need. So, it seems like a simple idea to grade your students, but there's a whole lot that goes into it. And we'll be the first people to say we're not the best at it. We'll be the first people to say that we've probably made mistakes in the past and don't do it as well as we can. But, this idea is important. It's something that we want to talk about and discuss. And then as in everything that we talk about here, we want to improve and become better too. So, it's the very powerful but difficult concept to kind of wrap our heads around.
As a side note, these are loose grades that we give our students. We don't have anything written down. It's a number that us as instructors have in our head, and we use this as we're teaching. We use this as a guideline to think about or to realize on how much information we can give each of our students and what level we can expect them to perform at.
I don't say this to sound sneaky or sound like I'm trying to get around something or go behind someone's back, but with these loose grades and as we're grading our students, never tell them. Never look at someone and say, hey, you're a 2. And this guy over here, he's a 7. Or, hey, you're a 4 and this guy's a 5. You never want to do that. This is something that we keep in our heads. As you said, it's not written down. It's not, typed up and plastered on the wall somewhere. In our heads, we have that idea, but you never want to say that to somebody. Whether it's the true or not, we never want to let them feel like they are less than or make them feel that they are not as good as someone else. Because again, it's not a comparative scale. I'm not comparing your number to someone else's number. I'm comparing you to how you were earlier or how I want you to be later. So as much as we need to implement and use these numbers to our advantage, we don't want to tell anyone what we are grading them, because again, it's not me compared to you. It's me compared to myself in the past or myself in the future. And we've talked about this before with motivation and correction and even being the best martial arts instructor in the world. We're always trying to improve over ourselves, not so much compared to other people. And we're always trying to do better for ourselves individually rather than trying to do better than someone else.
This grading scale could even be instructor specific, meaning you have a number for John and I have a number for John, and they're pretty close, but you're looking for different things, or he performs differently with you than he does with me. And so those number scale isn't necessarily a firm, yes, John, you're a number 4. You need to raise 2 points by the time you get black belt. It isn't that way. And so the instructors, your team, your staff are going to have different numbers for each and every different person because of how they interact and the teaching style they have versus somebody else's. That, let's say, again, John learns very well from Master Kent. He doesn't learn very well from me, right? Because my style is a little bit different than his. And so Master Kent may have a number 7 for John, and I have a level 5 or 6, just because the teaching styles differ between us. And so, yes, I fully agree. That's not something, you definitely don't want to have it plastered up on the wall. It's not something you want to tell, hey, John, you're a number 3, and Sally over there, she's a level 7. So sorry, man, she's better than you. That's not going to go well, right? So this is just a guideline, a loose guideline at that you can use and your staff can use when you are teaching and instructing your students, just so that you know how much information you can give them, what level you can expect that person to perform at, and how much you need to push or motivate them as they progress through your ranks.
Yes, sir. Yeah. What would you say is a good approach to take to help to treat everyone according to their level, but also get them to a higher level? Like, how do we treat them? How do we interact with them in our classes to help to get them to improve those levels for themselves?
Yeah. So anytime we have a partner setup, a partner drill that we can do, if you can pair up we're going to use numbers. If you can pair up a number 3 with a level 4, that's going to help that level 3 raise up and do a little bit better to be that level 4. If you can, on the flip side of that, if you have somebody that's at the top of the class, okay, then you maybe give that person some extra feedback, some extra information, some extra little tips or instruction on what to look for as they're going through their practice or going through their moves. If you can even position two relatively close numbers next to each other, that would be helpful. You don't want to have a level 7 next to a level 2, and then you get into a situation where you have a healthy competition going between them, those two individuals, because that level 2 is not going to be able to perform or outperform or even be close to that level 7 just because that's how and who they are. But if you can have that level 2 close to a level 3 or maybe even a level 4, then you have that healthy competition, or you apply that healthy competition tactic or level to their training, then that can help to improve their numbers as they go. Do you have any other ways to improve as they go?
Yeah, I think it's a good way to approach it and look at it. And I think there's definitely other things that we can do, but nothing's coming to mind right now. And I'm sure there's things that we aren't aware of and aren't implementing. But I would love to be able to continue to dive in and talk about that stuff and potentially, hopefully, learn more about it as well.
Right. Yeah. And, with our students, of course, we want to be firm but fair. And firm but fair means really what it sounds like. You want to be firm with your students, but also fair. Have a specific ways that you want or need them to be performing these moves, ways that you require them to be done. It's too easy to be light and fun and loose in class. And when that happens, the class it goes off the rails, right? Then you have to try to teach that bad class and turn it back into a good class. Again, once it's down that road, it's tough to get it back, right? So being firm has different levels as well. Of course, you can't be as firm with the newer or younger students or those students that have a lower number, that you've graded at a lower number than the higher students. They have the firmness, but to a lesser degree. Being firm means that you expect your students to perform at the level that you require, and if they lower their performance, then you step in to remind them, and then that helps to get them or put them back on track. Being fair can be tricky if you have a level 2 student in class with a level 5 student. You need to be fair to their level. You can't expect that level 2 student to perform the same as the level 5, but you can expect the level 2 student to try hard and continue to work towards moving to their next level. A challenging part of this is not all of your students can perform at the same level. Here's an example. We had 2 students start at roughly the same time. They were right about the same age. The first student we'll call John, and John would show up to class. He would excel. He had a natural talent. He could pick up the information easily and perform at a high level right from the beginning. The other student, we'll say Mike, was not in the same league as John. It seemed he had no talent for the martial arts at all. He was barely able to pass his belt test. When they would test together, it was easily apparent who was at the top of the class and who was at the bottom. Mike continued to show up for class, and after a year or so, he started to get the hang of it. As he was learning a new movement, he still would work real hard and was required to work real hard until he actually was able to do the move somewhat successfully. While Mike didn't have a natural talent, he did have a great work ethic. John would still be able to see the move one time and perform it as if he's done it before. About 2 years, their skill level seemed almost matched. It's not that John stopped performing well, but rather Mike moved up to his level. When they started, you could say that John was already at a level 6 or 7, just based on natural talent, while Mike was a level 2 at best. As they continued their training, John stayed pretty well around the level 6 or level 7. Mike slowly moved from 3 to 4, and so on. After 3 years, Mike had surpassed John, who was still riding on natural talent and actually started to be more like a level 5. He knew that he had the talent, so he never really had to practice. He didn't have to put the work in. But now, as the material was getting tougher, that lack of practice, that lack of habit to practice was starting to show. Mike, on the other hand, had the work ethic. He knew how to practice. He knew how to put the work in. And because of that, he was able to pass John, who eventually quit because the material got to a point where he needed to practice but didn't have those skills built up. John had the "I got this" mentality, and that failed him.
As we can see from this example, and something that we can gain from it, is that if we were to have treated Mike the same way as we were treating John from the very beginning, then maybe Mike never would have been able to move up in his levels. Maybe he never would have been able to advance. But because we understood where Mike was and we give him the proper kind of encouragement and the proper kind of treatment, over time he's able to improve those levels again and again and again. Now, the only downside of this, of course, is John, who was riding that natural talent and never put in the work and eventually ended up going back in his level or his performance level. And so in that situation too, maybe we helped out Mike, but maybe we should have paid more attention to John. And because he was riding that natural talent, performing at a high level, he was one of those students who may have been not as closely watched or not as paid attention to as much as he needed to. So, tying back into the whole concept that everyone is different and we need to be grading them and treating them appropriately according to their grade. It's that reminder that we cannot neglect those higher levels to focus on the lower levels. As much as the lower levels need our attention, the higher levels cannot be neglected because there's still room for them to improve, So it's a good look at both sides of how this can be beneficial and how it can go wrong, and a reminder for us to not treat everyone the same, but then also make sure that we are still devoting our attention and helping everyone to improve, not just that lower end of the spectrum in our levels in the class, but everyone as well. Because even if Mike made it to a higher level and John didn't, we're not saying John is stuck. John can still improve, but whether it be because Mike had a better work ethic and John never developed that, or whatever happened in class, again, treat everyone according to their level, but then don't neglect them if they're at that higher level. We need to continue that throughout the spectrum at all levels of our grading.
Being fair is also setting achievable goals for your students. You cannot require them to learn the entire course material in one day. You have to set reasonable teaching sections for them. If you have a student who does something wrong or didn't practice for whatever reason, or for whatever reason doesn't know the information, you can't punish them for that. Simply let them know what their mistake was and move on. If you have a time in class that you can give them to practice the older material so that they aren't trying to add on extra information that they're not ready for, then that would be a way around that. But don't punish them because they didn't practice or because they don't know their information.
We've talked about this so much already. Even most recently, we were talking about the idea that forgetting is the default. You can almost expect them to forget and expect them not to practice or not to work on the stuff. It's sad to have to say, but like you said, if we don't get to it in class, or if we're not teaching these things and expecting them to know them anyways, that's on us. We should have the lesson plan and have the ability to do things. And if we didn't get to it in class, then don't expect them to know it next time. Even if you say, hey, go home and practice this one thing, go into it expecting that they didn't and expecting to have to go over it. And if they did, then great. You're set up even better than you were before. But again, it's being fair and having those achievable goals. We need to help them as much as we can in that situation and not make it even harder for them to achieve them. And like you said, we can't punish them for that too, because if they don't know something and they didn't practice, some of that disconnect might be on our end, whether we didn't teach it to them, or we didn't stress the importance of practicing, or we don't have the realistic expectations set up for them that they can reach. Then that's on us too. It's not saying that they are doing terribly or they're doing bad. But again, one of my favorite things to say is do that honest self-reflection and think about what's actually happening and what's really going on, and view the situation from an outside kind of look and perspective to help them and help them improve, rather than put them down and punish them for not practicing or not knowing something per se.
So before I say this next thing, as our students progress through the ranks, they're at one belt level with one instructor, and then they move to the next instructor as they move to the next belt level, and so on. So they're not always, so if I have a group of white belts, they don't stay with me, for example, all the way through their belt levels until they get black belt, and then they cycle back through. I teach yellow belts with a white stripe. Master Ken teaches white belts, and then at the next level, I teach brown belts, and he teaches green belts, and so on. So it's ever changing. The instructors and the students are never with the same group for more than 3, maybe 6 months at a time. Now, all that being said, with this concept of being firm but fair on the first day, if not within the first week, at the end of class, I tell my students, I'm not worried if you think I'm strict or tough. I'm not here to win your favorite teacher award. I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to teach you martial arts. I'll be friendly to you when the time comes. I will also be firm to help you become not only a better martial artist, but ultimately a better person.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we talked about that from the beginning, just in our different teaching styles. But I think on the outside, it's very evident or very clear to see the benefit of that and how that is useful. And some people might think that's harsh. Some people might think that's not how you should be as an instructor. But, from the outside, as I mentioned earlier, it's clear for me to see that does have its benefits. And it can be a very good way to push people up those levels and help them to improve, as you said, not just in the martial arts, but help them to improve as a person too. In conclusion here, wrapping up this concept of grading your students, we've kind of been all over the place and talked about the many facets of this and why it's important and how it can be detrimental and how you should balance those two things. But at the end of the day, as we led with and mentioned so many times, we cannot treat everyone the same. We need to be firm. We need to be fair. We need to set realistic and achievable goals and standards for our students to meet, and recognize that not everyone is going to meet them in the same way, in the same time frame, or even with the same ability as other people. So being able to have this grading scale and then grading everyone appropriately, not on paper, not to their face, but understanding how they learn and how they perform, is going to be key in treating everyone as best as we possibly can. It's going to be key in getting them to improve in their martial arts, improve in their regular day life, and it's going to be key in getting them to get the most out of our program and also get the most out of being here while we're on the floor with them training. So having an idea or a system to grade people and understanding the ins and outs and intricacies and the different parts and facets of this is important. And as we said, we're not saying we're great at it. We're not saying we can do it the best possible, but we at least have been exposed to this idea and are familiarized with the idea of all this stuff. And that's, if we were to grade ourselves, that's putting us a few points above, I think, someone who hasn't even heard about this or thought about this. And of course, with the grading scale, there's always room to improve and become better. So being able to present this in this platform on this podcast, I think hopefully can be helpful for other people teaching their martial arts or dealing with their students, and being able to treat everyone appropriately, treat everyone fairly, with the intention of helping everyone to improve and become a better version of their self, as well as a better version of ourselves too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If you are learning, if you're gaining information, if this is useful information to you in your school, if you've been able to apply some of the different ideas or tactics that we've talked about, we'd love to hear your feedback, hear how you've implemented some of these things or different ideas you have. You can reach out to us on Facebook and Twitter and Reddit and YouTube and Instagram. You can find us at MA Teaching Tactics. That's MA Teaching Tactics. Of course, we're on all the podcast players as well. And if you are a Spotify user, we have video podcast on Spotify as well. Until next time, I'm Chris Bean.
And I'm Chris Kent.